So I had asked you to compute the average, the class average in this example. So you would have added up all the scores. They add up to 682. You would have divided by 10, and the class average is 68.2. Okay, so if you thought of using statistics like mean and median to describe how people typically did on an exam, you can see that having to include these zeros created a very misleading situation, right? It makes it sound like the class did awful on the exam. Notice everybody did better than the class average, right? If the class average is 68, every single person in the room did better than that. It's just the two people with the zeros really pulled down that average. So that can happen sometimes with extreme values. Okay, extreme values can influence our average in a way where that value that we get for average becomes very misleading and very misrepresentative of the data set. So if we wanted a better description of our data set, if I were to find the median, so I hope you remember median is the middle. Median sounds kind of like medium, right? So, if you went into McDonald's and, I hate that when I go through the Starbucks drive-through or something and I order something and then they'll say, well, do you want small, medium, or large? And sometimes I'm one of those annoying people who says well, how many ounces is in each one? But medium, all that tells us is it's just in between the large and the small, right? Well, what does that mean, right? It's the one that's in the middle. Okay, so for median of test scores, what you would do to locate the one that's in the middle, since there's 10 scores, there's 5 this way and 5 this way, and I do have them in order. So the median is right here. The median is halfway between 84 and 85. So we would call it 84.5. Okay, that's what happens if you have an even number, even amount of data, you average the two in the middle. So notice that the median gave us a much better representation of how the class performed. We would say, yeah, typically, it was typical in our class to get about a score in the mid 80s. All right, that's a much better representative. So where you're going to see median the most in real life, right, is if you're looking at income level or home values. Home values are always given in median, using median. Okay, they never say the average home value in an area. They always will say the median home value in this area is, 160,000 or something like that. So number 12 is going to illustrate that for us, right? Where we have a bunch of values and, typical homes, and then some really rich person comes and builds this mansion. All right, so it'll be exemplified here why it is that we want to use median. All right, because if we used median, then sure, this would go at the top. So let's see, how many would I have here total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So which one's in the middle? This is high, high, high. So median would be the 151,000, right? Which is typical. Okay, that's the median. What you're going to notice when you compute the mean is that the mean ends up being very misleading, right? Because that rich person, that extreme value was able to pull the average way up in a way that distorts what the data really says, right? As far as the value of a typical home on Cherry Street. Okay, so we've answered this part of the question. So for your participation, all you have to do is find the average home value. Okay, that's all you have to do for 12. So often students will say, when I ask them questions like, why do we give median incomes or median values of homes? And often students will say, well, because either really rich people or really poor people, right, will pull down the average. And what's interesting And almost a little bit sad in a way when you realize that the rich people, how much rich people really are much, much more rich than the average person. It's only the rich people that affect this. It's never the poor people. Okay. And so let me exemplify that. If we have 39 people that earn 40,000 per year, all right, but someone is unemployed and earns zero. Okay, so here's our quote, poor person. All right, to find the average, I would have to add up the 40,000 39 times. So I'm just going to multiply that by 39. But then when I go to divide, right, I'm going to multiply that. But when I go to divide, I have to divide by 40 people, right? Not 39 people because one person earned zero. So 40,000, excuse me, times 39, and then divide that by 40 is 39,000. Right? So that's pretty crazy that an unemployed person, right, only pulled that average down $1,000. Right? This is an extreme value, right? But it's not really that different than the 40,000. Okay, but then look what happens with the million. Okay, so take this exact same number that I got up there and add 1 million to it. Okay, so I do this plus the million. I'm just going to put 1M, right? And then I do that, take that answer, divide that answer by 40, and look what happens. I get 64,000, right? That is not even close to being representative of what's typical of people's earnings. Okay, so having an unemployed person just barely moved our average, right? But having a millionaire moved our average up. This is like 50% more, right? If you took 50% of 40,000, that'd be 20,000. Add it back on, right? This is more than a 50% increase because of one millionaire. So that's how, that really shows you how much more a rich person has than a typical person who's average, right? Or a typical person who's average is not that far away from people that you would consider to be poor. So that's kind of a sad statistic about the gap between the wealthy, the middle class, and the poor. So thanks again for watching. And like I said, be sure to add number 12 to your participation work.